Hi, my name's Oscar. This short video covers Navigation ISPEC Module 15, that is measuring distances on the ground in relation to National Navigation Award Scheme at silver level, and therefore designed for cadets training at Star 3 level. So the key learning points from this video will be measuring distances using pacing with reasonable accuracy, measuring distance using timings with reasonable accuracy, and also understanding how different terrain underfoot can impact on those pacings and timings. So firstly, let's look at the pacings, and I'm going to be referring to double pacings. And what I mean by double pacings is simply this is 2 strides that we would take. It's very important that we always start off on the same foot if possible, and be very familiar with our own personal pacings across 100 metres. Now visually, judging distance, I would recommend using a football pitch, which is typically around 100 metres, but in this case we want to adopt a far more accurate approach. So to do that, we need to be familiar with our own personal double pacings. That's 2 strides. So if you're starting on your left, fine. If you're starting on your right, fine. But try and apply this every time. And simply measure out 100 metres in a safe environment and walk normal pacings, double pacings up to the 100 metre mark, and note the number of pacings. I'd probably advise us to do this at least 2 or 3 times. Once you've established your pacings, you then can apply that while following a route. This might be on a route card or an expedition, or when you're actually following a route, and you can actually work out your accurate distances. Now, the general rule of thumb, and this is the average, so there will be an impact on your height and your level of physicality as well in this, but the rule of thumb is that the average double pacings is 64. So again, just to refer to double pacings, it's double pacings, not a single, 2 strides, normal strides over 100 metres. That gives you the ideal benchmark of your own personal pacings. Now, we must be familiar with the impact on those pacings as well, because if we are just doing this down a path, on our front drive, our front road, over that football pitch, whatever environment of flat ground that we're taking those on, we're not always going to be in that sort of environment. So we must recognise that when taking a certain pace, that the impact on that, say if our average is 64 for instance, and all of a sudden we're in a hillier terrain, then we can obviously expect that to change, and we must be mindful of that and what impact that could have on our pacings. Likewise, downhill is a typical example. When you'll be watching your footwork as you go down a scree or be scrambling down, you're going to be significantly slowed down on your pacings. And obviously even weather can come into it that would slow you down. The start of the morning, for instance, when you start your day 1 of your expedition, you're more sprightly and you'll go over that period of time probably a lot fitter than you perhaps will towards the end. So that's pacings over a certain, obviously pacing 100 metres and getting to know your own pacings, double pacings over that time. So we've covered pace counts. Now we're going to go to timings. How to use timings to measure your distance travelled. So again, we can apply this from our 100 metres, because now we've got our pacings, we can also apply timings to the 100 metres, and all the things that I just mentioned will still come into play with that. Now, I am a big believer in using the Naismith Rule, and I'll very, very quickly show you an annex that is covered within ISPEC15, which is our speed and distance chart. Okay, this is what I would use. My version of this is quite straightforward and simple. I have a laminated copy that fits quite handily into my pocket. So when I'm out walking or in a mountainous environment, I've also got my wind chill factors on the back, which can come in useful during the winter months. But more essentially, using the Naismith Rule suggests that on average we'll be at 5 kilometres an hour. This chart, as you will see here, is a complete duplicate of what's holding up in my left hand here. So not only can we apply timings across that 100 metres, And why I like the Naismith Rule so much is it really encourages us to get our heads out of our map, yeah, you know, and lose that distraction of maybe counting our double pacings or maybe looking at our timings. The Naismith Rule is quite straightforward and simple. You can work out, let's say for instance, I already know from experience that in normal terrain I'll be 6 kilometres an hour. However, if I'm probably on a more mountainous environment, I'll be at 5 kilometres an hour. And you can see this gives us those timings based on the Naismith Rule. And just a point to note, the Naismith Rule, Naismith was a Scottish mountaineer that introduced this many years ago. And I do thoroughly recommend. It does make it a lot easier. As I said, it gets your head out of the map and allows you to look at the features, the shapes of the ground, core features that you will see, and your timings can be applied simply to your stopwatch, and you can work yourself across that timing. So for instance, in normal terrain, I'll be at 5 kilometres an hour. It's going to take me 12 minutes per kilometre. I can simply set my stopwatch and off I go. Naturally, if I stop to check a significant feature that I may be past, what we typically would call a catch feature, I would stop the stopwatch, and then once I familiarise myself where I am, use that as a catch feature or a collect feature, I will then progress on, unrelease the stopwatch, continue to my destination, and look at the timings along that route for the leg that I've chosen. And from experience, this is fairly reasonably accurate. So, just to recap on this very short navigation lesson, typically pitched for cadets training at Star 3 level, aligned with ISPEC15, which is the training module, and also the navigation award scheme at Silver. So, measuring distance using pacing with reasonable accuracy is all about your double pacing and making sure you know your double pacing across 100 metres. Measuring distance using timing with reasonable accuracy is like with your double pacing, putting a time to that pacing so you know exactly how long it takes you to do 100 metres. And then if you really want to bring in the Naismith Rule, and as I showed you the annex there with the time and distances, apply that as well, using timing pacings as well. And we already talked about the impact of the different types of ground that could slow you down or hinder both your pacings and your timings. The percentage that you can be out is probably going to be between 10 and 15, maybe even 20%, subject to the terrain that you're on and how difficult it is to walk in that terrain. But combination of these, a combination of pacings and timings, can constitute to giving you a very reasonable, accurate way of applying those when you're out on an expedition or a walk, to help you stay on track. And again, I thoroughly recommend using the Naismith Rule. That's all from me on this session. I hope it's been useful. Thank you.